Donny Phillips, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks so much, John. Looking forward to it.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Ohio. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. We're going to be talking about HR's expanding role in the protection of employee data and kind of the related technological conversations around all of this. Really, I think HR has always played an important role here, but that role is expanding, it's growing, and ultimately we live in a world of big data, and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that appropriately, effectively, ethically, and safeguard information. So that's what we'll be exploring and discussing together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Donnie's bio with everybody. Donnie Phillips is a nearly 30-year industry expert who has served in leadership for multiple human resource and payroll service providers, including some of the largest third-party administrators and employment and income verification vendors. During his career, Donnie has consulted with and provided services to employers of all sizes, from the largest of the Fortune 100 to local small businesses, as well as local governments and federal government agencies. Donnie is passionate about helping clients optimize programs while focusing on doing the right thing for all stakeholders. I love that. Such great expertise. Thank you so much for joining us. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
No, I think you really covered it all there, John. Again, looking forward to today's conversation. And I think it'll come through. This is an area that I'm very passionate about on behalf of the customers and employers we work with, on behalf of their employees, and really just the whole concept of doing the right thing in this HR space.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you can start by just kind of setting the playing field for us. Like, what is the current state of employee data protection? Like, where are we at in terms of the types and amount of employee data, what most organizations are currently doing, and where some of the gaps are?
Yeah, I think that's a great tee up, John. I couldn't have asked for a better starting point in this whole conversation. So the space I've been in, and it's largely been business process outsourcing related to HR tasks and payroll tasks. And there's probably a couple of dozen solutions that employers tend to outsource. So we're talking unemployment claims management, maybe hiring tax credits, I-9 compliance, all these different functions that HR owns but outsources. Uh, the current landscape, when we talk about the data engagement in this space, virtually every vendor is acquiring data through what we would refer to as bulk data
Mm,
acquisition. So whether it's an API integration or a file-based or an SFTP flat file-based integration, the strategy is largely similar. These vendors are acquiring data on every employee of their customers. Often, if it's anything that's involving income or earnings, they're often gathering that data on every employee every pay period. So those are
mhm.
a lot of data being transacted, and that would be highly sensitive information: full name, socials, address, earnings information, job title, lots of things that the bad actors would love to get their hands on. And many enterprise customers are probably integrated in that type of model 8, 10, 12 times, it all concurrently. So they've got all this outflow of data. Um, the other thing I think is important to mention, talking about this data protection, I think there's kind of two views on it. Pretty much any vendor that even we come up against has really good data security, kind
Yeah.
of the protection, the wall around the data. So I think there's competitively, that's largely flat. Where the big difference exists is what is the approach to privacy? How do vendors help minimize data? That's where we see a big gap today in the HR outsource spaces. There hasn't been much focus on minimizing that data. And that's where we're very different, of course, and we'll probably get into that a little bit, but that's really the key focus area here is understanding that data security is a little bit different than data protection.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. And so the question is, do we really need to be collecting all of the data that we're collecting, right, on an ongoing basis, so that the privacy piece is really vital. Yeah, and I appreciate the distinction between data protection and security. Okay, so there's definitely some gaps there, and I suspect, given the current state of affairs, um, with ongoing, just exponential growth in the capabilities of AI and these sorts of things, it also means that bad actors have increased capabilities. for cyber attacks and data breaches and those sorts of things. It seems like every week I get some sort of an email from some organization that I'm affiliated with in some way that they've experienced a data breach, and so I have to go change my passwords. And, that's just the norm, I think, in today's environment. And it seems like it's probably likely to only increase, just because it's going to be so much easier for bad actors to set up, bots and various things that are super good at making those breaches. So on the one hand, data security and the wall behind the data is generally pretty good. On the other hand, is that going to be sufficient moving forward? And what are, vendors and employers doing with that?
Yeah, yeah, and I think something you said there, John, just kind of keyed up another thought that I did want to also mention when we talk about that landscape. Is HR probably is similar to everybody else that works at an enterprise organization. They're trained on how to protect customer data or how to
Yeah.
protect the data that they have their hands around every day.
Hmm.
But where the big risk here is what we're talking about, third party data breach. And I kind of wanted to segue to that because we follow all kinds of different privacy and risk management organizations, privacy attorneys, and several different special interest groups that we participate in. And it's definitely becoming clear that third party risk, third party data breach is growing rapidly. I've got a couple of statistics here that let's see, the average cost of a data breach was about almost $5 million in
Mm,
2024, which is a 10% increase versus 2023. We're seeing exponential increases in those being third party breaches. So once that data leaves your system, leaves your four walls, that's where the risk is. And that's what we want to talk about, how to put some practices in place to really mitigate some of those risks, like to virtually eliminate unnecessary data exposures.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Like, what are some of those things that you can do, and what's HR's specific role in that? Because obviously, not all of this falls on HR. Like, there are, depending on the organization, I suppose, and the size, the complexity, and the maturity of the organization, that they may have totally different areas that are focused specifically on risk and data security and such like that. But in most organizations, given the nature of the data that we're constantly collecting on employees, what is HR's role there?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and it's a pretty broad statement, it's for HR to have awareness. There are
Hmm.
better models out there than what everybody's accustomed to.
Hmm.
So I talked about that bulk integration model where it's every employee, every pay period,
Yeah.
for whatever outsourced solution we're talking about here. The other thing, and you kind of touched on it, John, I think you made a statement that kind of really went down this path, but it is there are models out there that engage the employee data only when it's needed, at the
Yeah.
time it's needed. And that's what we're doing. So, just for example, if we're talking a 10,000 employee organization on a biweekly pay period, in the current bulk data model, that's 10,000 employee records every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
You could look at it as 260,000 records transmitted every year. Now, a lot of them is going to be on the same employee, but it's 260,000 records. Just specific to what we do in the employment and income automation space, on that 10,000 employee population for that 2 week period, we would expect somewhere between 50 and 75 uses of data. So just by going to this as needed, one record at a time model, we're avoiding touching over 9,000 records, probably close to
Hmm.
9,950. That's just untouched. There's nothing that could possibly be safer than not touching the data. So, and then the cool thing we've done, John, and won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but with our integration model, we are definitely API first. Our whole strategy is to minimize the data engagement. We actually work with a vetted network of partners in the solution space. Some of those things I talked about, unemployment, hiring tax credits, absence, and leave management. We can be that single point of integration, and they all act on this real time as needed basis. So we can eliminate 99% of data movement, not only for our solution, but across all of the HR technology space. So it's a really cool model. And if there's one takeaway from this whole conversation, it is to really focus on minimizing the data exposures that your organization is enabling with your third party
Hmm. Hmm.
relationships.
Yeah, and part of this means, and again, it depends on the organization, the size, the complexity, the maturity of the organization. But for many organizations, this means modernizing, right?
Yep.
Updating and modernizing your tech stack and how and the vendors that you're integrating with and all of this, right? So yeah, how do you see, an HR executive like a CHRO or senior HR director, what's their role and how they can help their teams to modernize, to protect that sensitive data.
Yeah, so typically where we have a lot of success is getting to the right stakeholder there, John. So it's like HRIS administrator or CTO, CIO, GRC, like the GRC, Global Risk and Compliance leadership gets involved from a privacy perspective, and we can talk through how this whole model works. It's really getting the right privacy-focused individuals that can help influence the outcomes. So where we would lean on HR in this regard is really to talk through making sure they understand what their current environment is and the
Hmm.
risks of that, and then talk about how they can improve all these things by, again, going down this data minimization road. And then, of course, selfishly, we're really good at this. So the cool thing for us is the lift to move over to our integration is one of the easiest integrations that an HR team's ever going to deal with. Um, the standard setup, so we've got API integrations into most HR payroll platforms. Our standard integration process takes about 30 calendar days.
Hmm.
We do all the technical build. Really, there's about 3 to 5 hours of investment that we ask for from the customer, and it's really just validating that we've set them up properly, that we've
Right.
yeah, translated their earnings codes and all that data. So it's 3 to 5 hours of validation work. We do all the heavy lift. It's not typically an IT project.
Yeah. Very good. So awareness is key, first and foremost. That makes complete sense. And depending on the executive, they may or may not be, more or less savvy when it comes to these topics or the technicalities of it, right? And so
Yep.
having a setup like you're describing where it makes it for an easier lift on the side of the organization, the employer,
Yep.
on making these transitions. That's certainly going to be hugely beneficial. I think most
Yeah.
organizations are going to say that. Anytime you're going through like any sort of change management around technology implementation, it's usually really hard. It's usually a long slog process, and everyone, kind of grits their teeth and are not super thrilled about it. So anything to smooth that out and make it more efficient and streamlined is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, I think HR tends to get, they develop a memory if they've been involved with moving HCM platforms. That is a massive undertaking, very painful, typically 18 months or longer in most cases. So sometimes we have to overcome that because that's not us. It's our integration is much easier than that. So I think that is definitely something that we see is the HR folks want their involvement in implementations and integrations usually on really large time consuming projects.
Yeah, yeah. So you've already, I mean, started to address this, but how difficult is it really to transition to an approach that better protects this data? To have fewer touch points, to not have the constant like all records all the time kind of
Yep.
mentality, to streamline. Like, what has been your experience in working with different clients?
Yeah, so I think largely it'll probably continue to improve. I think out of necessity. I think some vendors and the integrations, depending on what specific process they're overseeing, they might have some regulatory obligations that are coming that will kind of force this model. But what I can tell you is this is a model that we've had live and active for our first real-time customer went live in 2018.
Hmm.
And we've done these integrations dozens and dozens and dozens of times. We've got about 5,500 live customers that we work with today. So you ask what our typical customer experience is. Obviously, we tell them, look, we can do this. It's very easy. We show them the map. We show them the project. Typically, what happens is when we get to that go live call, they
Mhm.
they say something to the effect of, "Holy moly, you guys actually did it." We always get told you're going to do these great things, and rarely does it happen. I would say 99% of the time we hit or exceed the timelines. And that includes we do custom builds. We've done one-off integrations into home-built platforms, as long as they have some type of API capabilities, and including we've integrated with some platforms where it's a very old platform that they've overlaid with an API
Mm.
platform,
Hmm.
and we're able to go this real-time model with it. It's so super cool. And then the other thing that we have gotten, part of why we've built out this partner ecosystem, is customer feedback. Like, your integration was easy to stand up. It's maintenance free because we're not getting a file that if you change something, it errors out. If you change and add a new earnings code, we'll see it that first time the record comes. And if it's not identified, we reach out to say, what's this earnings code? We don't have 10,000 records that error out. So it's much less maintenance on the ongoing, and there's really no project time to it in terms of like a dev team or an IT team. So the customers were ones that were like, man, we wish we could use your type of integration, across some of the other solutions. And we're like, we can actually do that. So we've baked it out. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 unemployment claims management partners. We've got 3 or 4 hiring tax partners, a couple of absence management partners. So we've really baked out this space. We're over 2 dozen solution partners we're working with today.
Mm.
We're largely partner agnostic, so we do this with employer permission. We would never activate that integration for one of those unemployment providers without the customer writing in the contract. Yes, we want you to activate this provider to have access to the data. Um, and we've deployed it over and over, and it works very well. So it's really cool. This conversation 24 months ago, there would have been
Mm.
some vapor. There would have been some vaporware in the discussion.
Mm.
It's
Hmm.
not now. It's fully baked, and we know it works well.
Yeah. So what do you see as like the biggest resistance, like the pieces of resistance that you see when you go into organizations, in large part just given their past history, their past experiences with these types of integrations and changes and maybe just the mindset shift of going from, all records are all the time to only truly as needed. Like what really sticks out to you as like those biggest resistance points that you have to overcome?
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest resistance points is, one, the current solutions from a day-to-day perspective, they work. That's the feedback. It's not optimal, but it works. So there's not enough pain in many
Hmm.
situations where they're like, we've got to make this change. Now, if we have
They're just kind of
someone who,
struggling along and it's just kind of
yep,
working but not great and everyone's frustrated, but they don't see the pain, the need to like blow it up and start over.
yeah, especially everybody's running thin, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's dealing with a bandwidth issue, and it's like, do I want to take on an integration project and a transition project when things are functionally okay?
Hmm.
That's one piece of feedback. Now, when we get to the right stakeholder and we can actually talk through the model, because there's some key benefits just to how we do it, because the data is real time. It's always up to the second fresh. It's pulled directly from the source of truth every time. We're not bringing it into our platform and homogenizing the data to make it fit our platform. We're actually reporting exactly what the HCM says. So if it's listed as, whatever job title and earnings type in Workday, for example, that's how we report it. We don't say, let's map your stuff so it fits our platform. But then the real time piece of it also makes sure that data is entirely fresh. So there's a lot of efficiency gains there. So when we get talking to the program owners, we can show them where maybe it doesn't feel so painful because it's what you're used to. Some of these changes will lessen your load, virtually eliminate your engagement, really. So again, I'll go back to your question here. I get off in left field a little bit, but I think the it's working okay is one issue that we encounter. The other thing is really just awareness in terms of just brand recognition. Vault
Sure.
Verify is still a smaller startup. We've grown rapidly over the last few years, but the folks we're competing against are really large, well-known brands that are in the credit reporting space. They're organizations that when you say their name, everybody knows them. They may not know, I didn't know they do this, what we're doing, but brand
Right.
awareness.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
that's the other thing. And when I say awareness, it's kind of 2 prongs. It's that, and then just awareness that there are better models. So, we can tee it up that, hey, we can do this better than what you're dealing with today. But until you get into the actual conversation, the details of the conversation, they don't necessarily know that there's really value in how we do it differently.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big vendors, like the big name recognition. That obviously that always helps, but you have these big vendors that have been around for forever that don't necessarily have the motivation to, really make the necessary changes.
Yeah.
They kind of continually put band-aid. That's kind of how I see it, is like there's like this continual layer after layer of like band-aid after band-aid, because people are already using the system, they're already in the ecosystem, and they're kind of familiar with it. They're maybe frustrated with it at times or whatever, but it's just easy. It seems easier to do it that way. Um, what do you think it's going to take to disrupt kind of the big players? Because the model you're describing just seems so much better
Yeah.
than what we typically see, from a variety of standpoints, data security certainly being one of them, but just general efficiencies and time and cost and like everything just seems like, it becomes a no-brainer, yet, it's hard to dethrone the big boys, right? And
Yeah.
so anyways, what do you think it would take?
So I think there's one potential tipping point that could really shift the scales in our favor here, and it is this data privacy legislation that's been rolling out for, shoot, it's more than half a decade at this point, just state level privacy. If more states were as stringent as California,
Mm,
we would absolutely have a massive upper hand in the space. A lot of the states have granted exemptions to some of the other vendors in terms of the data privacy obligations because their credit reporting. So they say we're governed by FCRA regulations, therefore we're exempt from, this privacy regulation. Some of those states even say employer data is not considered consumer data, so it's not under the
right.
scope. California does have employee data in scope. But I think if we got some oversight with teeth to it, like California, I think there would be a necessity for employers to find better models. So, of course, from our perspective, we're definitely pushing ourselves in California because there's a legit, case to be
Right.
made there. I think what we're waiting for, what will help us, and not that we're wishing this on any employer, but when that first fine hits for employee data, I think there'll be a scramble. We've seen it for consumer data, and
Yeah.
California has stood up. They've got a whole branch of agents and investigators that are investigating and setting up for enforcement in the CPRA. So I think it's a matter of when, not if, something will unfold. And like, again, I hate to name names, but it's a very public case. I think it was 24, it might have been 2023, but Sephora got a $1.2 million fine for not processing the consumer opt-out request. I think it was. It was related to the consumer data. But a $1 million fine would probably give some employers a reason to think
Right.
about, oh boy, we probably need to look at this and tighten the belt, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, and again, just the pace of change, technological disruption, I think all of that is going to continue to push us this direction. And I would love to just see things continue to become more efficient, more streamlined, more simplified where appropriate, and less touches, right,
Yep.
of key sensitive data is always going to be better. And so that's definitely a mindset shift, I think, for a lot of folks. That's something that we can work towards. Well,
Yep.
Donnie, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I'm going to need to let you go here in a minute, but before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your firm, your team, and then give us the final word for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So hit our website. It's very easy, vaultverify.com. We have all kinds of resources out there. If you go to the partner, I run partnerships for Vault Verify. So if you go to the partnership page, my contact information's right out there. There's also a link to request a demo. We're always happy to get engaged and talk with the customer, even if there's not a sales opportunity, this month or this quarter or even this year. We're always happy to start building those relationships. And again, we're very, very intimately focused on doing the right thing and helping employers. Sometimes that is nothing more than doing a little bit of consulting up front, and
Hmm.
we know down
Hmm.
the road it'll pay off. We've seen it. We've two of our three largest customers would historically refuse to outsource because they didn't want to expose data. Once they got connected, they're like, "This is exactly what we've been looking for a long time." So we know the model resonates when the right person gets involved. So again, hit the website. My contact info is out there. Happy to take on any questions, calls, demo requests. Look forward to it.
Wonderful. Donnie, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Donnie can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.